Hello and welcome to the Oxygen Addict podcast. We're brought to you every week by our sponsors, precisionfuelandhydration.com. You can personalize your fueling and hydration strategy so you perform at your best with 15% off your first order of electrolytes and carbohydrate fuel with the code OA23 at precisionfuelandhydration.com. Welcome to the show, everybody. I'm your host, Coach Rob Wilby, and I'm joined by Coach Chris Palfreyman. Chris, how are you today?
Hello, everyone. Hello, Rob. Very well, thank you.
Great to have you back, mate. Listen, every week we bring you an episode of this podcast to try and help motivate and inspire you. If you like this episode, there's two things you could do for us before we get started, please. Firstly, if you could like and subscribe either on YouTube or hit follow on the podcast app, that really helps the reach of the show and helps new people discover us. And if you're looking for help and advice with your training, whether that's for 70.3 Ironman or any combination of swim, bike, run, endurance events, please get in touch. We'd love to hear from you and find out how we could help you out with a membership of Team Oxygen Addict and expert coaching. You can email us at help@oxygenaddict.com, or there's a link in the show notes. You can book a call with Chris or I. We can have a chat and find out how we can best help you. So this week's episode, we're going to talk about strategies for a second peak in your season. We're really aware, aren't we, Chris, that there's lots of people have either done or are approaching completing what they consider to be their A race of the season or their first A race of the season. And by A race, all we mean is the thing that you've been building up to all the way through the winter, all the way through the last, who knows, 3 months, 6 months, 9 months. It's quite common for people to get to that point, for them to complete the race and then go, oh, what now? What do I do with the rest of the summer? And we hear people talk about the Ironman blues. We hear people talk about really feeling lost after that first big event is done. And we've got a ton of ideas on how to not only help you avoid that feeling, but to thrive over the rest of the year, haven't we, Chris?
Yeah, and I think we're seeing a lot of athletes get the very common issue of Ironman blues. You do your big A race, which Rob just spoke about, and then there's this huge void, this huge gap to fill. And it can kind of go two ways, in my opinion. One is you did your big race, you want to get back to it immediately, and you're lining up your next big Ironman or equivalent. Or there's the other athlete, which is there's this big hole and you don't know how to fill it, and slowly but surely structured training and racing becomes really daunting. And we've put so much into that A race that anything that's not an A race feels kind of pointless. It's not the case at all. And I think that's what we're going to talk about today. Is the A race is really important, but there's a whole alphabet. There's B, C, D and onwards, and they're all brilliant experiences in themselves.
I like that. There's a whole alphabet. I think the thing I'm going to encourage everyone to think about here is you have built a enormous bed of fitness by training for your A race, by training for a 70.3 or an Ironman. You forget quite how fit you are, definitely relative to the general population, but also relative to the you from 6 or 9 months ago. You've got the option and ability now to do stuff that would have been a real challenge 6 or 9 months ago. You can almost go out and pop out and do stuff any weekend you want to for the rest of the summer. So that's what we're going to talk about in this episode. Before we continue, I want to give a shout out to our sponsors at Precision Fuel and Hydration. You can head over to their website and use their free fuel and hydration planning tool and receive a personalized strategy for your next race. The planner will help you understand your own carbohydrate, electrolyte, and fluid needs so you can refine your strategy during training. And you can also book a free one-to-one video consultation with PF&H's athlete support team, and they'll be happy to help you nail your race nutrition plan. That, in turn, will help you perform at your best come race day. We totally love this company, don't we, Chris? We love the products, we love the people behind it. They've helped so many of our athletes out this year get the electrolyte balance right, that allows them to get the hydration right, that allows them to get the fueling right, which allows them to deliver the race that they're capable of on race day. And it's so heartbreaking to read when an athlete's done all the training and the race doesn't go to plan. And it turns out the reason for that is either electrolytes, hydration, or fueling just either didn't have a strategy or didn't follow the strategy. So if you've got your races coming up still, there's still tons and tons of time for you to take care of this. Get over to BF&H and take care of it. Okay, so then strategies for the second peak in our season. So again, our overall, my overall goal for this episode, Chris, is people who are maybe sitting there a little bit lost at the minute get to the end of this and go, yes, I've got tons of opportunities. I didn't even realize I had these opportunities. I'm going to get out there and I'm going to really make the most of it. And I'm going to flip this on its head to start this off, because I can remember having the Ironman blues. It's a good while ago that I raced Ironman now, but I can remember completing my last Ironman and thinking, oh, wow, I've been building up for this for a whole year. I've done it. I'm kind of tired of forcing myself out of bed really early to go training. So I know I don't really want to do that anymore. So what am I going to do now? And kind of missing the point that I could have gone out and done a 5K, a 10K, a half marathon, a time trial, a half marathon, a marathon, gravel racing, any of these things I could have just have gone at the time. And I didn't do. I went out and did a bit of sporadic training, but I didn't throw myself into going out and doing things for fun. And I think it's because of what you said before. I was very much in a type A mindset of, if it isn't an A race, it doesn't count and it doesn't matter. And why would I want to go and do a 5K just for fun when I've got nothing to compare it to and no benchmarks? Flip that round to now, and I'm making a bit of a comeback with running. And I've managed, just today, I've managed my first 30-minute continuous run in, I think, in 2 years, right? And for me, I was saying to my partner the other day, I would love to go and do a park run. I don't know if I can even do a 5K continuously at the moment. And it turns out I can, because I just did one. But I said, I want to go and do it. And I don't care whether I even break 30 minutes for it. This is coming from a guy who, was worried if he didn't get under 16:30 when he was racing, it was like a disaster. I was just like, just want to see if I can break 30 minutes for a 5K. Can I get out and complete the whole thing without stopping? And I look back and realize I had so much fitness 3-5 years ago that I perhaps didn't use for its real value, which is to go out and bloody have fun with it. Just go out and do stuff for fun. It's now, honestly, man, it's such a massive uphill battle to go, can I get myself to the start line of a 5K? Like, now I know I can, and I'm thinking maybe I should aim to get on the start line of a 10K. But for people who are in the position of like, you've just done an Ironman, oh my God, you can do anything. You can go out and do absolutely anything for fun. You can go and race dressed as a fairy if you want to, but you can go out and race and have fun and use that fitness in different events that maybe you haven't focused on so far.
I think that's what's quite particularly unique about middle distance and long distance racing, is that, yes, there is a fun element to it, but there's a really serious element to it, that
right.
We can't be cutting corners. We have to dedicate X amount of hours. We are up early. We are, late training. All those kind of sacrifices do go into a journey to get you to the start line and finish line of a middle distance and long distance. But this is something that I've seen, particularly in triathlon, it's so different to other endurance sports. If I think about my training partners, who a lot of them are just road cyclists, and they race. And when I say they race, they really race, and they race multiple times a week. That can be a Wednesday night, could be a Thursday time trial, and then a road race at the weekend. And I'm like, what? How do you do it? How do you race every week? And then well, that's the beauty of being fit, and we can recover 72 hours after a road race and we go again. And that's what's so amazing about something like the Tour de France that we've all been watching over the past few weeks. We can't do that as middle distance and long distance Ironman triathletes. But once you've done your big A race, there's this whole window of opportunity, and that means you can go and do a Wednesday time trial. It means that you can go and do a trail run, a park run, all these things that coaches kind of red mark on your training plan in the early part of the season, saying, no, come back, athlete, we don't want you to deviate. You want to go and swim the channel? No, come and do that another year. You want to go and do the London Marathon? No, come back and do that another year. But suddenly we're changing the narrative, and we're now saying, you're really fit, as long as you look after yourself and health is still a priority. There's absolutely no reason why you can't go and do 2, 3, 4 races within a training block. Absolutely no problem. One thing that I would say is that the athlete that is keen to do that, you're going to have to be really careful to change your mindset. Your whole mindset over the past 6 months has been performance oriented. It's about doing fast transitions, about doing an efficient swim, a fast bike, a really strong run off the bike. And all these things are really detailed oriented. Whereas if you start to play around in park runs, in trail runs, in off-road cycling events, the mentality has to switch, because you can't expect the performance to be at the absolute best of your ability. That doesn't mean it's not fun. It means it can be more fun, but you have to pull back a little bit from the expectations. And I'd encourage you to kind of pull away from, oh, what time should I do? Or can I get top 3? Can I get top 10 in my... I think that it's probably healthy when you go into these events that are slightly more fun and B, C, and D races, that go and look for experiences, go and look to improve other aspects of your endurance journey. It might be your skill set in terms of how to handle a bike. It might be working on your weaknesses. So if you rarely swim in the sea, then maybe look up some sea events, whether they're in the UK or further abroad. It's that time to throw yourself into events that you may not have done in the lead up to the A race of a middle distance or long distance. But I do think a mentality switch has to happen. Otherwise, you're gonna dig yourself a hole of basically chasing performance when performance isn't necessarily going to be there for you.
Yeah. My experience as both a runner and a time trialist in the seasons where I've kind of focused on one or the other was, when you get yourself to a certain level of fitness, it becomes more about a race season than it does become about a performance A race. And I think that's what's unique about middle and long distance tri. You can't go and race one every week for 4 weeks. You're going to do just one of them. With 5Ks and 10Ks, with time trials, with road races, to another example, you can go and race, certainly with cycling, you can do a couple of them a week. And what you find is you get fit, and then one night the conditions will be perfect. And my experience was my power would stay broadly the same on all the time trials, but some nights would be, 40 seconds faster over 10 miles than another night when the power was within a watt or something. So you get this kind of little subtle difference in, and I always struggled with this as a time trialist, because to me it was watts equals fitness. But to a time trialist, it's speed equals performance. And so you go, well, it doesn't really count because something was different tonight. There seemed to be a tailwind in both directions, and I've gone nearly a minute faster. But it's the stuff that we don't get to do as A race focused early season athletes. You can do some of this stuff now and really, really have fun with it. So yeah, I think that's our general introduction to it, isn't it? To understanding the double peak. You can either have a fun couple of months of doing whatever you fancy of racing, or there is the option to have a genuine second peak in your season. You can enter another middle distance race. You can enter another iron distance race. You can even, for the people who are really into it, this is the perfect opportunity, especially if you've raced Ironman, to enter an autumn marathon. I think that makes a great second peak for some people to focus on, because if you've already done an Ironman in particular, or even to some extent a half, but definitely with the Ironman, you have got a ton of slow, steady running in your body. And it's the perfect launching off place to do a proper marathon prep and introduce some marathon pace tempo runs in. If you want to go and do a marathon performance in the autumn, I think it's so much easier to do that in an autumn marathon than it is to do it in a spring marathon. You train during the summer, the days are really long. You've got before and after work to do it. You've got plenty of races to use as tempo runs, and you've got this massive volume of running in your body already. So often I think for the people who, especially people who've joined us for coaching and said, I want to do the London Marathon, and we've gone, actually, if you're going to do an Ironman and focus on that, it's one or the other. A late season marathon can be a really good thing for people to have as their second season focus. And often we see that work really well for triathletes who are staying fresh. They can kind of not let the cycling go, but certainly turn the mental focus on the cycling down a bit and really focus on their running and wanting to get a performance out of the running. And that tends to work really well, I think.
I believe that another quite important aspect to all of this is understanding that you might feel a little bit lost after your big A race. And that's not anything to do with your physical fitness. Your physical fitness is there and will be there for the forthcoming months if you look after yourself. But what we neglect often as athletes is the fact that we're very structure oriented during the 6 months in the lead up to the A race. And then suddenly, if we kind of encourage athletes to go and do park runs, sea swims, gravel racing, gravel adventures, whatever, suddenly we might wake up on Tuesday morning and be a little bit confused of, should I go and train now, or actually should I not be? And that's where often we see athletes nearly despising the training because they don't know what they're working towards. So on a person, this is my personal experience of it, and it's not going to apply to everyone, but this is something that worked for me and a few training partners, is if that that you're in, call it middle distance or long distance triathlon for another season or two, then try and find a solution that gives you structure but allows flexibility within that structure. So for example, you're about to do your A race, or you've just done your A race, and that gives you another 4 or 5 months this year of basically it's freedom. There's a window of opportunity where you can explore your fitness, explore the great outdoors, not have too much pressure at all in terms of time and the type of events you do. But maybe psychologically it's going to help you if you pencil in your diary that actually in June, July, or August of next year, I plan to do my next A race. And you don't necessarily have to fully sign up if you're not ready to do so, but mark it in your calendar, or at least mentally, that there is that longer term goal. But within that structure, you've got a freedom of 3 or 4 months of either working towards your weaknesses that are going to help you in that long-term goal. So if swimming in the open water is one of your weaknesses, then maybe go and find some fun events that don't have the pressure, but you can go and experience different bodies of water, and it can be sea swimming, river swimming, lake swimming in different parts of the country. And that that's going to be fun. And you also know that it's working towards a longer-term goal. If you find that bike volume and bike strength towards the latter half of your racing has always suffered, then this is a perfect opportunity to strap a few bags to your bike and go and visit your long lost relatives in Scotland and go for a 3-day cycle touring trip on your own to Scotland or Wales. This is the time to do that. You've got the fitness and you've essentially got the freedom within your calendar in terms of training to do so. And we're going to encourage that as coaches, and we can adapt your plan to make sure that you're still in physical shape to be able to do that, but also mentally you have the freedom to play around with your sessions. And I do think that we don't want the athlete to be overly structured when you're not working towards an imminent goal, because that's a sure way to burn yourself out. We want you in this sport for as long as possible, and the longer you're in this sport, the more likely you are to actually reach your overall goal in the sport. So yeah, maybe that's my advice to the athlete that's listening, of keep that long-term goal in, but build in some flexibility and fun essentially into the forthcoming months.
And I think that really ties into the idea of mental preparation for a second part of a season. It's covering ideas of how we maintain our motivation in the second part of the year, how we can set new goals for ourselves, and how we can manage the expectations for those goals. Because it's often such a challenge for people who have been working towards one big thing and then all of a sudden are not working towards a big thing anymore. Common comments are, well, I don't really feel like I want to tick off the sessions in my base training part of my training plan at the moment. My answer to that is actually, as long as you're using the guidelines from your base training sessions, i.e., you know what pace you're going to be running, you know what powers you're going to be riding on the bike and why, none of that's really too important. It's less a question of being driven by the training plan, and more to the point where you know how to train now. You know how to go out and have fun on your bike and how to have fun on your run, and to not give yourself danger of illness and injury. And any amount of swimming, running and biking done at the right intensity is going to help you build towards the future. So it's absolutely not, at this point of year for our athletes, it's not about a race ready score. And that's because the system is called Race Ready. It is getting you ready for a race. It becomes about, well, that represents our fitness level. That represents we've managed to get ourselves into the 80s or the 90s or whatever. We are now really fit. How do we best make use of this fitness to go out and have fun and have a great time during the rest of the summer? So yeah, I think what we're coming to here, Chris, is we've kind of got two kinds of athletes, haven't we? We've got athletes who are going to have a very rigidly defined second peak to their season. It's going to be another Ironman, another 70.3, a marathon, and we're going to have a very specific training plan leading to that. And then we're going to have people who don't want to have that very specific kind of second part to the year, who are going to have lots of smaller events along the way that need shorter tapers and shorter recoveries, but much less of an A race kind of focus on those events.
Totally. I'm going to put my coach's hat on, and I say this because I've seen it too many times before, and it's with the athletes that have done middle distance or long distance. They have this, call it Ironman mindset. And yes, we know you're fit, but that doesn't mean you need to go and be doing the most extreme events. And I've just seen it too many times. They do their big A race, and a month later they see this marathon des Sables, or how far can I run on a track for 24 hours? Like all that stuff we know you can do, but
yeah,
we're not going to stop you doing it, but we're certainly not going to encourage you doing it. And just because you know that you can go between 10 hours and call it 17 hours on your feet all day, it's not necessarily going to be the best thing towards your overall goal if you suddenly dig out this massive event that, you know, we haven't prepared you for, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
And so just because you could do it isn't necessarily the right decision. You need to be, you know, looking after your health mentally and physically to the absolute maximum. And in my opinion, you know, that is not going over X amount of hours on end. So just be a little bit careful. And, you know, I'd much rather see a handful of park runs or the odd day cycle or the odd long swim, as opposed to 72 hours. How far can I run? That's not what we're looking for.
A Goggins challenge of running 4 miles every hour for
Be a little bit careful with that.
Yeah.
You want to come out of this phase really energized, really mentally and physically kind of niggle free, completely ready to throw yourself into really structured training towards your next A race when the time comes. So keep that as that's the main objective. Essentially, it's being happy, being healthy, and playing around with your fitness a little bit and exploring new opportunities. But it doesn't mean finding new limits in a new sport, I don't think.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think it's worth sketching out like a traditional British or Northern Hemisphere race season. Typically involves racing through the summer, and then it involves deciding what we're going to do next summer during this current summer. So most people are going to have a good idea of what they're aiming for next summer, certainly by the end of August. And we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves, but when the end of our summer comes around, sort of September time here, we're really big advocates of taking some downtime during October and having a kind of end of season break. You'll still swim, a bike and run, or a combination of those, but it's mentally to go, my focus is not on looking at my training plan every single day. It's having that 4 weeks or 2 weeks, whatever it needs to be for you to rest and refresh. That's my one caveat for athletes who decide they're going to do a really big end of season event that stretches into October or November, is when a lot of athletes are then starting to train in their winter block at the start of November, and you're not racing a marathon till the end of November. You then need some downtime, and it's suddenly January before you can sort of get back into your winter block, essentially. So I'm a really big fan of thinking, let's use the fading daylight of September as the end of our season. Let's get to the end of September and think of that as the kind of the full stop of our Northern Hemisphere summer. October's downtime, and then into our winter build for most people. And that really, I think, for athletes who, as we're recording now, sort of the beginning of August, that gives you August and September. It's 8 weeks worth of either a fun season, a second season peak, whatever you want that to be. before you then start thinking about some downtime before next year. So that gives people a little bit of context, although we're only just into August it's ridiculous to start thinking about October. As long as we sketch that out in our brain, it lets people think, well, there's maybe 8 weeks here to go and do the little road race series on bikes, or the time trial series, or the local 5K series, or whatever that is, if they don't have a specific second day race peak of the season to get through.
Yeah, I'd highly encourage the athletes that think that this is kind of relevant to them to send us an email, or if it's one of our athletes on Circle, share your ideas with us, because I think that a lot of athletes get a little bit in a tangle of coming out of the big A race, and they see the next big thing and they just sign up to it without maybe reflecting on what they've just done and what they want from the next 6 to 12 months. So maybe whether it's a conversation or just bouncing ideas over email, please don't hold back. We're really happy to, share our thoughts on that on top.
Yeah.
But yeah, don't make that decision on your own if you're doubting yourself.
Yeah. And we're currently seeing within the team that we coach tons of sort of late season races coming in, people entering sprint and Olympic distance triathlons and saying, look, I don't want a specific plan. I don't want a big taper and recovery from this. Just give me a couple of easy days before it and a couple of days afterwards. I'm just loving the opportunity to make use of the fitness I've already built from 70.3 and Ironman to do some more local races. And I think that's a fantastic opportunity for people, because our triathlon careers are going to be finite. So make use of the fitness you've got now to go out and have some fun and do some events. And not everything has to be perfectly prepared for. Just go out and make use of the fitness that you already have and have fun.
Really.
Right, well, that just about brings us to the end of this week's conversation, I think, Chris. Before we wrap this up, some discount codes and deals for you listeners at precisionfuelandhydration.com. You can use the code OA23 for 15% off your first electrolyte order. And at teamoxygenaddict.com, I think we've got the most comprehensive endurance sports coaching platform for busy age groupers, be that for triathlon, ultra running, duathlon, you name it, any combination of swim, bike, run events. If you are a busy age grouper who's struggling to balance the demands of family, of work, and of structuring your own training, we can kind of do the heavy lifting for you. We can give you the plan. All you then have to do is turn up on the day and do the training, and we can do all the worrying for you. So if that sounds good, you can book a call with me or Chris to see how you'd be a good fit for joining the team. And let's see how we can best help you achieve your endurance event goals for the coming season and beyond. So remember, there's links in the show notes, so you don't have to remember them. And until next week, have a great, safe training and racing week. I'm Coach Rob Wilby, and he's Coach Chris Palfreyman, and you've been listening to the Oxygen Addict Podcast.